So as Jen said, we're going to be talking about ride sharing. Before I get started, I do want to acknowledge my team. We have actually a rather large team. Masabumi, our postdoc, I saw him walk in. There he is. He's back there. And Sven, the professor of computer science, is here. We have two students who are here, Chow and Kathy. You saw Kathy last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, I think. It was 2 weeks ago. And then my colleague, who used to be at USC, and now it's at Chile, Fernando Dornas, used to be a faculty member. Now, I know when you see the word ride sharing, we're all kind of skeptical. Ride sharing is one of these things in transportation that's been around a long time. And Peter, before my presentation, gave me an article in 1970 talking about ride sharing. It was different. It was called something different back then. And we'll talk about what it was called back then in the 70s. This actually, the talk today is going to be a little bit more than the project. So what I'd like to do is basically set the stage and basically give you kind of a perspective of where ride sharing is today. Things are really dramatically changing in the ride sharing industry. And then talk about kind of the challenges and the opportunities in ride sharing, and then move into the specifics about our project. So about half of the talk will be about the project. The other half will be kind of setting the stage and the groundwork for it. So as I said, the first half is going to be more kind of getting the definitions and the classifications of where ride sharing is today, where it's going, and what we expect. Second half is what are the research challenges, and what is our project specifically going to do in terms of meeting these research challenges. OK, so this is a transportation group. Don't have to convince you transportation is important, or you wouldn't be in this seminar. But I mean, if you want some data, 10% of the economy is consumed by transportation. There's a group in Texas that always updates the cost of society for transportation, 100 billion. I was just reading a proposal today where someone quoted in terms of the cost trucks do to everybody else in terms of congestion. It's close to up to $80 billion. I'm not sure how they get these numbers, but let's say they're off by 10%. Still a big number, right? If it's off by 50%, still a big number. So we know congestion and has a significant societal cost. I mean, that's not a debatable point. The next statement is quite a debatable point. The research team, and what started this, is we come under the impression that there's capacity. It's just that it's not efficiently utilized. Right? I mean, people say that we're overcapacitated, so we need more roads, we need more infrastructure. And I'm not debating that. Infrastructure needs to be improved. The highway system here needs to be improved, and so on and so on, the rail system, and so on. But there's still a capacity. And so let me just go back and give you a background behind how I got involved in ride sharing. I didn't wake up one day and said, Eureka, ride sharing is the future. Actually, how I got involved in this project was kind of peripheral. Sven, my colleague in computer science, and Fernando, my colleague in optimization, kind of had weekly meetings. I don't know if they had some meetings, and they said, wow, optimization, AI, great tools. We should find a project where we can use the two, where we can merge computer science AI techniques with IE optimization techniques. I said, well, Fernando says, I have this friend Majid over here who knows something about transportation. So we started writing NSF proposals to it. There was a big call. It didn't get funding, but the nice idea is that we had this proposal sitting. And the FHWA came through their exploratory, I don't know if you're familiar with it, they have an exploratory advanced research program where they basically, the most amazing thing dealing with the Department of Transportation. It's not something I typically deal with. I typically deal with NSF. Their definition of basic science is quite different than NSF. So they had an RFP which said basically, write a proposal about how transportation is going to be like 30, 50 years down the road. So we came up with this idea where basically I'll talk about our idea with the ride sharing and the marketplace behind it. So we kind of became very innovative and came up with this transportation system of 35 to 50 years. But one thing I've learned as this project continues is they keep consistently asking me, what can we do to get this stuff implemented tomorrow? And I keep having to remind them that I wrote a proposal for something to happen 30, 50 years, and they don't like that answer. They want the answer that, so basically what they define as basic research is something they want to implement within the next 3 to 5 years, which is a completely different type of approach than something that you're trying to do 30, 50 years down the road. But one thing I've learned in the last 2, 3 years working on this project is what we said may happen 30, 40 years from now, I'm starting to believe can happen within the next 5 to 10 years. I'm going to give you data and statistics that are going to hopefully convince you that basically the marketplace for ride sharing and things are happening at speeds far greater than I ever envisioned when I started writing the proposal. And the issue is, can the government catch up with what the industry is doing? And right now, from what my understanding is that they're not there yet. So what we have is we wrote a proposal, got funded on something called the transportation market. So what is the transportation market? I mean, I'm going to use a couple buzzwords. The way we consider the transportation marketplace is the eBay of transportation. So what I mean by the fact there's idle capacity. All of you who are driving a car have excess capacity unless that car is full, right? You have 3 or 4 extra seats. It can be considered a business. You could sell that extra capacity to the bidders out there and have them share the ride with somebody. So it's kind of a marketplace for ride sharing. It can also be thought of as treating every car like a taxi. I understand there's regulatory issues, security issues, and all sorts of issues about treating your car as a marketplace in terms of regulations, in terms of licensing drivers and all that. I understand that, and we'll get to that. But there are things today that makes that quite possible. Most cars, if you buy, have equipped with GPS. People now have downloading apps which can basically sign up for services in real time. And the matching of drivers with passengers is not something that you can envision cannot happen instantaneously and be automated. So these are things that technology is enabling that can happen. And the thing that I've learned in the last 3 years, which I didn't know when I wrote the proposal, is there's companies out there doing that today. There are companies out there matching passengers with drivers with apps in real time. I'll tell you how theirs is a little bit different than ours, our vision of the future as we get in there. But some of the stuff that I thought was going to happen 30, 50 years ago, as we're doing our background, people are doing it today. Uber is a company out in the Bay Area. It's being tested in, they've been sued by some cities, but it's been in San Francisco. And they come in and basically, they license drivers. And they're just basically a matching agency. And they'll do it. And some taxi companies, of course, don't like this, right? Taxi companies will not like any kind of marketplace for ride sharing, right? That's the biggest competitor. And taxi companies, of course, spend a significant amount of money keeping things the way they are. You know how much a taxi license costs in New York City? $1 million. That's a lot of money, right? I mean, so that's, those people who invested in that aren't going to give that business up easily, are they? So there's that whole issue about regulatory behind it, okay? So the way we view it is everybody's been stuck in traffic. I mean, the transportation place is not sustainable. Everybody's sitting in their car. And so economists may argue, well, what point are people going to ride share? People do not like to ride share today because why? It's convenient to be by yourself. You don't want to be with strangers and all sorts of things associated with it. Suppose the price of gas goes up to $20 a gallon. Will you ride share then? Suppose it costs you $40 to go to work. Would you ride share then? Who knows, right? It's not something that's not conceivable. So congestion is going to keep increasing, not just by people, because of goods in the freeway. So it's quite what I would say on the exponential curve. You know what city in the world? Yeah.
Why isn't the answer public transportation?
Because that's a good question. It doesn't have the flexibility. It's because the workplace is not centralized in the West Coast. So public transportation is part of the answer, right? You know what city has the worst congestion in the world? Anybody? Anybody know what city in the world has the most congestion? No, not even close. It's in Brazil, São Paulo. And they have a mass transit system. They have a very good mass transit system. It's just that the way the cities are being built are pretty much not going around with the mass transit. You know how the rich go to work? Yeah, helicopter. So the Jetsons are here, right? So I mean, things are changing, and they're happening all over the world. I mean, you've got to understand that the marketplace is changing, and things that people say, oh, they're not going to do this, it's not true anymore, right? People helicoptering to work, right? But not everybody can afford that. So there is mass transit. I'm a very strong proponent of mass transit. But the problem is it's not going to answer all the questions. It doesn't have all the flexibility that everything. Okay. So this kind of shows you one of the companies out there, Vigo, that's doing kind of the matching services. So they're very pretty user interfaces, but they're not very sophisticated in terms of the technology behind the matching and ride sharing. But what this shows you is basically, you basically say where you're from, from to destination, and then out comes some possible choices and details. I really don't want to get into details in terms of the software, but I'm going to show you a couple of sample slides of the companies. I mean, this isn't the only one. There's many companies out here that do this. Forgot to mention, in about 3-4 weeks, it's kind of nice. It's kind of nice and it's not nice because it's more work, and no one's looking to do more work. But the funding agency, again, I keep having to remind them, it's 30 to 50 years is what we're working on. But they say, well, we want to get this thing deployed. What's the next step to get this deployed? So one of the things they're really big about was having a workshop where they got the academics, industry people, and government people together in a workshop. And they funded it. In fact, they're funding it. They funded us $40,000 extra just to have a workshop. On top of that, they're paying on top of the $40,000, they're paying another 20 participants funds to participate in the workshop. So they're putting a lot of money on their own for the workshop, for a one-day workshop where they have one of their speakers is going to be from Vigo. That's the reason I mention it. We have 2 or 3 speakers from industry coming to this workshop. We have government people who've been doing ride-sharing programs, and academics. And they're putting us all in a room in one day, and out comes a report saying what's going to change. We'll see. OK, so basic definitions of ride-sharing. Basically, ride-sharing is a joint trip between 2 participants who share a trip, and they have the same origin. May not have same origin or even same destination, but they have similar time requirements. Maybe not even that. Maybe someone's willing to wait for a price. This is basically where things have been historically, right? You share trips with your family, colleagues. I'm a product of the 70s. And in the 70s, this was ride sharing. You know, it's kind of, Peter gave me this article, which has kind of brought back memories. My 2 best friends hitchhiked across the state of California. This is an article in 1970 talking about people hitchhiking in California. That was very popular, right? And then, of course, the creeps got into the business, and that changed the whole equation. So hitchhiking is not exactly something people do. So there's now organized ride sharing. What this shows you is something called slugging. That's a term that's used in the East Coast. And it's happening also. It happens very specific. It's basically at one point where people just show up randomly, and people come and pick them up, and they drive. It's not for a fee. There's no fee going on. There's no marketplace going on here. The reason someone's doing it is, why would this person do it? Carpooling. In the Bay Bridge, I think it's the Bay Bridge, yeah, where we're going in the city, there's a fee. If you have 2, I guess 2 or less, I'm trying to remember. I know for 3 or more, it's free. And so the problem with slugging, and there's a place in Berkeley where they do this, where they cross. The problem with slugging is what? What do you think the problem would be? Think about it. If it's market-driven, it's got to be marketplace. So you get the benefit going. What happens when you come home from Berkeley? Do you get charged? No. So is there an incentive for you to go pick up somebody to bring back? None. Okay? So people typically could do the slugging on the way to Berkeley, and from Berkeley to San Francisco. But on the way back, guess what? You're probably taking BART. I mean, why would I stop, pick up somebody, bring you back if I'm not getting any economic benefits? So slugging works in a very kind of has to be very specific reason, very concentrated. But it's not going to people pick up other people just for the goodness of their heart. It's just not going to happen. In fact, you see it. I mean, you couldn't build a better field test than what's happening in Berkeley, where people actually come pick up people across the bridge, but they're not willing to do it to come back home. So, I mean, you don't need to do any more tests. That tells you everything about human behavior, right? And so today, you're basically seeing a marketplace. And they're divided into what's called the service operators and the matching agencies. The service operators are the people who provide the cars and the ones who are driving. The matching agencies, which is what Vigo is, they're the ones who match the drivers with the passengers. And they'll do the matching based on some criteria, based on origin, destination, or time, or whatever. But they're not really owners of the cars. Uber doesn't own their cars. Vigo doesn't own the cars. So just a quick historical. I mean, actually, ride sharing has been around since the 70s. The government got in it for the goodness of the country, right? Save fuel, move on. Carpooling, drivers take turns, supported by companies. We talked about the instantaneous ride sharing, where you have the casual carpooling and the slugging. And then this is the new area. This is where we're operating at. This is the vision that we see. This is what we see is going to change the marketplace down here. Everything else has been around a while. Nothing new, nothing original. Let me give you some, I forgot to give you one data point that in terms of why I think things have changed. You guys heard of a Zipcar? You know it got sold right now? Who bought it? Avis bought it. You know for how much? $500 million for a Zipcar. You know how Zipcar came about? It was the female CEO of the company. She was working and she decided to raise a family and decided that she didn't want to work anymore. So they were living in a house and her husband was using the car to go to work, and she realized she needed a car for chores around the neighborhood, but since she didn't work, she couldn't afford a second car. So she saw other mothers like this who had the same issues. And they convinced themselves that why don't we have a car that we could share among ourselves and just move it around among us and save costs. And that started the idea. And if it worked for them, they said, okay, well, it can work for the marketplace. And she formed Zipcar based on that simple philosophy. Right? Sharing. So that was a little different, right? You still have the car, but sharing car. So I mean, the next generation is obviously then sharing your seat, not just the car. So some considerations when you do ride sharing. As I said, clearly when you do the matching, the origin and destination are very important. The time that you want, and then the type of trip itself may decide how you do the matching. Whether it's something you do every day, commute to work, whether it's a long distance trip or a short distance trip, is an occasional trip, is it planned, unplanned, how you do all this is going to determine how you want to do the matching. Okay, so when you think of ride sharing, the most simplest one is, I'll just talk about the single passenger case, and the multiple passenger case is going to be almost identical. I mean, the most obvious is if the passenger and driver have the same origin and the same destination. You and your neighbor are going to work at the same place. That's easy. That's a very easy matching. That's not a very difficult one. Could be an inclusive, where you pick up someone and drop them off, but they're on your way. They're on your way, so it's not going to do much of a detour. Could be partial, where you pick up someone that's on your way, you drop them off, but then this person has to take maybe another bus to his final destination. Could be partial ride sharing. And then the one that's really the most, I think the other ones you can envision happening. They're the ones that are easy to schedule. The ones that are more complicated to schedule are, the detour ride sharing, where you actually think of your car as a way to make money. And you think you could maybe go on a detour, pick up someone, drop them off on the detour, and then go on your trip. So this is, the reason you do this has to be, you're not going to do this out of the goodness of your heart unless it's a dear friend or something, right? This you will have to be incentivized to do it. There has to be a market to drive this. And that's really what's the interesting case from a scheduling optimization point of view. I'm missing a slide, but anyway, the interesting thing about this case here is it might be, if you have the multiple case, when you extend it to the other ones, when you extend it to the multiple case, it's straightforward. When you extend this to the multiple case, there's going to be winners and losers, right? There's going to be winners and losers. And the question is, how do you give an incentive to the losers to participate? The losers being someone who gets no benefit from the ride sharing, because this detour, the detour he has to take to pick up the other people is too great of a cost. How do you give an incentive for that person to participate in ride sharing? So that comes to be with the whole pricing. So where I'm trying to go to is there's some research issues here that you can't see built into these kind of high levels. Question is how you price a marketplace ride sharing is a really interesting, complicated question. How do you schedule and route these things? I'll talk about those later down the slide. Later down the presentation. Okay. So each request has an origin, destination, and very important. Very important is this part from a scheduling point of view. How soon does the person let you know they need a time, right? Are they giving you 24 hours in advance? It's going to happen. I call you and I says I need a ride within an hour. Because that dictates the kind of schedule. Is it dynamic? Is it static? The latest notification time is in the latest this person has to be told the match has occurred, right? So maybe he wants a ride tomorrow, but he wants to be told what the time is and what the match is, and he can wait till 8 o'clock in the morning to find out. But maybe he needs to find out within an hour so that way he can finalize his plans. That's the notification time. So the difference between those times is your matching time windows. That's how long you have as a company to make this match. As a matching company, you want a bigger window, right? The bigger the window, the better chance you have optimizing your system. The smaller this window, the less flexibility you have, and the higher costs you're going to incur. So that's the things you want to set up an incentive system where you have the flexibility, so that way you can get the best possible routes and scheduling. Okay. So the matching today, if you look at it, is probably, and I'm probably the wrong person to be giving the slide. I probably should have Masumi come up and give the slide, because he's looked at a lot of different software, a lot of different companies on the web who do this. But this is kind of a summary of the things I've heard and seen. Basically, you could think of it today as an electronic. Most of the matching is really an electronic bulletin board, is the best way of saying it. I mean, you think about when you're in college, when you were doing ride sharing, there'd be a bulletin board saying, I need a ride from my university to this city, right? But that easily could be extendable to the internet, and that's what these matching agencies. So they basically, most of the searches aren't really by address. They're more like from a neighborhood to another neighborhood. It's not to that fine level of a street address. So that's not really going to do much if you're talking about daily commutes. That kind of level of aggregation works pretty well for irregular long-term trips, right? But when you're talking about everyday places where you got to go to the hospital or you have to go to work, you got to get to the specific location, specific address. That's the level of fine-tuning you want. So that's one common way of doing the matching. Another, and there's actually a company that does this, and it was an Australian company. Remember that company that they have flags out there, and basically they have a fixed route. And it's not a fixed route, because that'd be like a bus lines, but there's fixed stops with flags. And cars would just drive around picking up these flags around the city to pick up the people. And so it's basically, you set stops at the major points, and the cars come and pick you up as you go. And this is the marketplace where we want to be at. This is where we want to be at, down here. We're actually using the mobile technologies to do the matching in real time, flexibility where you're picking up people from anywhere, dropping them off, matching them, assigning them, taking them to their destination. And that's really the future, I think. You can't have a marketplace really in these two, but you can here. Okay. So as I said, the search criteria can either be based on a specific route and time, an OD pair. And the OD pair here is not a detailed address in specific. It could be just a city, region, and so on, based on time, keywords, again, first come, first serve, and you could talk about the different segments that you're looking at, on demand, long distance, commute. Okay, and then here are the different ride sharing ways people do real time, carpooling, long distance, carpooling, and one-shot ride management. So these are all different types of systems. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about where we see the marketplace versus today. And we were talking about the different agencies. So the axis here is the flexibility. This is the ultimate in flexibility. It's like your tailored trip. And here's the most limited in flexibility, and that's public transportation. And here's the way these businesses operate. These companies, taxi companies, would say are revenue maximizers. Each additional trip is maximizing revenue in terms of each individual trip is trying to add dollars to the company. The way we see ride-sharing actually is not a revenue maximization. We see it as a marketplace for cost minimization. How do you share the costs of the trip and spread it across? So this is the marketplace where we see it, and the most significant one would be the dynamic real-time. That's where we're looking at studying, the dynamic real-time ride-sharing marketplace, where goods and services are distributed. Now, why do I call these where they're at? The taxi company would be the most revenue max. Here's the airport shuttle. Van pooling. Just want to mention a little bit about van pooling. It's USC has a van pooling service. In fact, when I'm doing all this, I got an email from one of the professors involved in USC, and he started telling me about the USC van pooling service. USC is actually trying to get out of this business. They're increasing the cost for USC van pooling. He doesn't understand why. And a lot of the people are leaving the USC van pooling business and going. There's companies out there that provide van pools and services, and that marketplace is picking up, and they find it cheaper just to leave the USC van pooling services to use the public one. In our workshop, we have someone coming in who's going to be actually talking about what companies do, because van pooling is it is a shared ride. But what companies can do to give incentives behind public van pools. Probably the best companies right now doing it, of course, Google. Who else but Google? When you have that kind of billions, you can subsidize van pools. Genentech is so if you look at all the really rich companies, they have pretty extensive van pools that tend to work pretty well. So that's the marketplace that we're looking at. The dollar ride, it's neither revenue maximization or cost minimization. I mean, if your dollar ride is basically the delivery of the paratransit of the elderly, they're clearly not running those systems as I've studied those for a long time. They're not really doing it to minimize costs, and they're not trying to do it. They certainly don't cover the revenue. The revenues don't even come close to covering the costs. They're mandated by the government to do it. Heavily subsidized industries. Okay, so this kind of shows you a little bit about what I was talking about. Here's another company, 551. It radius around the origin, 4 miles. That's a pretty big. We're just putting in some numbers. 4 miles, and radius around the destination. It tells you where the matches can be. You could give the whether you want to be a rider or a driver, and what time you need to be at work, and the flexibility. So this is some service that's provided to the areas in San Francisco. And then out comes the solution. Here are the possible people they could be assigned to. Here's another one, Rideshare, where basically they list the potential matchers. So this is, again, not a marketplace, no pricing, just basically matching drivers with passengers. Okay. So here are basically where we see the challenges and where we see the marketplace going. So if it's going to be dynamic, it has to happen instantaneously. For it to be sustainable, there has to be a lot of people. Right? If there's only a few people participating, you're not going to be able to sustain it. The marketplace is going to only work if there's a lot of people willing to share their car. There's got to be some measure of trust and institutional design. There has to be trust and reputation systems built into these systems, or they're not going to work. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the pricing and instantaneous ride matching. Okay, so I have a very simple example, a very basic example that's going to illustrate a lot of what I consider the major research challenges. So consider you have two drivers. You have driver one, who's going from here to L3. Where is it? Oh, he's going from L3. This is weird. This is going from right to left. Must be my Arabic here that's doing this, L3. So it's going from this driver's going from here to here. You have this driver that's going from here to here. Then you have a passenger who wants to go from here to here. Okay? So let's look at this very basic, simple case. Okay? The cost for both per mile for both drivers are the same. And the window, the times they put it all were pretty close. And the driver time is earliest is here, here, and here. And it takes, let's say, 8 time units to go from here to here. So if driver 1 goes, it's going to get there by 8:08. If this guy goes, he'll be able to get there by, this guy is by 8:20. So it's not. So the question is, which driver should do it? Neither has to take a detour, right? Neither one of these drivers has to take a detour. Person they pick up is, this person's going here, picks him up on the way, and this person's here is actually at the same location and takes it there. Which driver takes it? You look at the cost per mile, and so on. The question is, what should they charge passenger to? What should they charge them? So look at basic economic theory. It says charge him based on his marginal cost. What's the marginal cost of picking up passenger to, just based on fuel consumption? 0, right? So you can't develop a pricing system based on marginal cost. Okay? So let's add, I know this is not a good example. So one of the basic pricing systems that I've seen out there is that people say, okay, we'll charge you the extra marginal cost that you provide. Well, in that case, you can see it's a very poor system in this type of system because the last person that's being picked up, their marginal cost may be 0. So you don't want to price it that way, obviously. So I don't have this in this diagram, but the other actually one that's another system that's happening that's very popular right now in Europe, especially in Italy, is something called taxi sharing. And I think those are going to fail because those are, if you go back to that one slide, taxi companies are revenue maximizers. Taxi sharing is being done very similar in spirit as ride sharing, split the cost. Taxi company ends up with the same money, but the cost is split among people. Yeah.
Well, as you know, there are many zero marginal cost businesses that exist by charging a membership fee. Are there examples in this business?
No. So basically, most people charge here based on a pre-negotiated price. Right. That's another way of thinking. But then, yeah. But then who you pick up then becomes, the problem is it's not quite going to work nicely because there's clearly better pickups than other pickups, right? So the fixed cost is not going to give you, there has to be some variable cost component.
Right, but there's a membership fee to get in, as with Costco.
Right.
And once you're in, you have shopping rights.
No, yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand with taxi sharing, is it the taxi company itself that's doing taxi sharing, or it's a third party who's coming in and putting people together to pay the taxi?
Within the taxi company, they will, you call a taxi company, and the taxi company itself does the sharing. It does seem, but if they're test driving, well, I'm not going to, some country in Europe is testing it right now. And here's how they price taxi sharing. Again, I'm going to give you a reason why it's a very poor system. So I showed you why the marginal cost pricing is very poor. Let me show you why taxi sharing. Unfortunately, this example is not too good for that. But consider a situation where you have 2 customers, different pickup locations, but same destination. And here's how they will price taxi sharing. You pay proportionally to the number of people in the car at that time. So the first person that gets picked up pays from his pickup point to the next pickup point the whole trip, right? The second person pays half the trip from that pickup point to the destination, right? Because they're splitting it with the other one. So the rule is basically you pay proportional to the number of people in the car per mile who are there. You can see that's a very poor system. Why? Does anyone see why that would be?
The person who is paying more is getting a worse trip.
Yeah, exactly it, right? I mean, why did the person get picked up first? If you switch to order of pickup, what you want to do is come up exactly with a pricing system where the order of pickup does not influence the price. Yeah?
You also give the option to the first person that you take for the car trip, then I will not pick up the second person on the way.
Well, you can have that too. I mean, that's what the taxi company may do, but I don't think they give that because most people, I'm not sure how the taxi business does that. So you could see where our first research challenge is really figuring out a pretty good pricing algorithm which just doesn't have the marginal cost issue, which doesn't have this, taxi sharing. I just actually reviewed a paper which actually was exactly that problem. The taxi sharing from a pretty good journal that they were testing it was basically using it. And I'm thinking to myself, you could do much better. And actually, in their systems, what they're finding out is taxi companies are actually losing money with taxi sharing.
tried any pricing schemes where they get more revenue overall if they have more passengers?
That's the thing. That was my exactly. That's exactly going to what we're talking about. The transportation marketplace. That's exactly the model they have to go through. So I think exactly that's going to have to happen. Otherwise, there's no incentive for the taxi sharing companies.
But so is the argument that they give away some of this efficiency, hoping that the lowering of the price draws more people in? Is that the idea?
The idea is to reduce the congestion. It's coming from basically the philosophy there's too many cars on the road.
But what would the taxi company care about that?
Well, they're being mandated. These are regulated industries, right?
Oh, so they're mandated.
They're being
Oh,
mandated by the city to say you have to do this.
Oh.
So otherwise, they would just raise their fees, right?
Absolutely, and they're supposed to. Exactly, that's the way to do it, right? So we can raise the fees or something, right? So again, you could see that the criticisms with the current ways of doing it. So trust and reputation. I mean, I think people. I mean, that's true. I mean, you want the car yourself. You want to listen to music. You don't want to have to deal with other people. You don't like people in our closed spaces, right? I mean, so you're gonna have to develop a trust and reputation systems, but that's going on, right? I mean, eBay has it. These systems have it. Problem with these issues is this: how do you rate a new user? I mean, I was a big TripAdvisor user a long time before it became popular, and I don't think they suffer from this. But reputation trust systems tend to have a bias towards positive comments. I think anybody who's used TripAdvisor sees that there isn't. And the reason I think TripAdvisor gets away with it and people aren't worried about bias and conflict is because they're not going to see this hotel again. If it's a negative review, they're not going to go to the hotel anymore. But now if you've had somebody pick you up and drop you off, and now you write a review with a driver, that person knows where you live. Right? So you might be less, so I could see where the bias here would be that you're not going to have negative reports because it's going to be a lot more less anonymous per se, right? So you definitely see the issues. Payment is going to be a big issue. How do you pay for this? If everybody's treating their car as a marketplace, how do you develop a payment mechanism? Especially when you get charged a fixed transaction cost, I mean, right? And the question is with no-shows. How do you do with the no-shows too, right? No-shows are pretty easy, I think, to handle if you do prepay something. I mean, I saw in the paper where some restaurants now are prepaying for restaurant reservations. So I think you could mitigate the no-shows by doing some kind of prepayment method that gets the marketplace going between these different parties. And then, of course, you could use social network sites to get people to participate and review each other's. So the trust and reputation is an issue, but I think technology is kind of solving that problem in some ways. I haven't talked anything about the regulation and because you can't really enter your car in the marketplace because there's laws against that. Taxi companies have made sure that. And there's companies out there doing it. So, I mean, actually, I love this company because it actually operates in life the way I do it. Do it, and instead of asking for permission, be prepared to say, I'm sorry. Right? I mean, that's what they're basically doing. They're not asking for permission. They're going to cities and installing Uber, and they're basically waiting to see if anybody in the local government is going to go after them. And most local cities have not gone after Uber. Some cities have. Other cities have not. Uber uses licensed drivers that are licensing their cars commercially. Okay? Some of these companies that are competing with Uber, and Uber is complaining that they're competition because you're always going to the lowest common denominator. Some companies out there are using people like you and me who don't license their car for commercial use. And so eventually, the way we see it, remember we're thinking about 30, 50 yards, everybody's going to have a commercial license. Everybody's going to have their car, they can use it and license it out. Okay, I'm not going to focus at all on this part of the talk because Kathy spent a whole hour on this. So one of the big research questions was, if we do a ride-sharing system, what's the new equilibrium? How many people, based on the pricing and the congestion levels, can be using the system? And so we've built a network equilibrium model to help decide that. And she spent the whole lecture last time presenting the model in details. But this was just a summary of what she did last time. Okay, so the marketplace. Spend a lot of time talking about this stuff. So what we are looking at doing is doing kind of dynamic pricing, continuous matching. One of the things is the examples I gave you in terms of the pricing, the person who calls last gets the benefits. What you want to create a system where it's incentivized, where people call early. Why is it an incentive to call early? Because it's easier to do scheduling, and you get better routes. And that if you're the first person who gets called, you're not going to pay more because you happen to be the first person on the route. So you want to develop a system that's and price the system back. So develop something that's inducing people to be early, where it says basically, if more people get in the car, you're going to get that benefit. And we will quote you a price, but that's the max price. You may actually end up paying less, right? Because when you make the reservation, we scheduled you on that car, but now we added some people to that car. There's going to be an extra cost, and we're going to share it. Remember, the whole idea is to share the cost. So your price may actually go down. I don't think the airline does that, right? You buy tickets, and the prices go down, and they come back and say, oh, we're going to give you a 20% discount. You're not going to share that benefit. Yeah.
So it's kind of like an auction?
Exactly like an option. Yeah.
If I should pay for the ridership, why shouldn't I choose a taxi? What's the difference between taxi?
What's cheaper? What's cheaper? That's the whole point. People don't take taxis because they're expensive.
But you just said taxi used to be exclusive business.
No, what I said is the reason it's expensive is because it's exclusive business. That's the reason it's expensive. I'm just simply saying that I'm proposing that in the future, I guess that our premise is that the cities are going to relax that, allow other people to get into the business, besides taxi companies, where basically we'll probably drive the taxi companies out of business, where everybody has their own car, or own vehicle, and basically every time you leave your house, you could put your car up for bid, right? I'm going to here, I'm going to this address, and get instantaneous other people saying, hey, there's somebody coming here, I'm going to hop a ride, and here's the price I'm willing to pay. So you can think of this as an auction of your idle transportation resource. And if that's enough, and that's enough volume, taxi companies will go out of business. The question is, there's always going to be a niche from taxi companies because there's some people who can't take the risk. I have to have a doctor's appointment at 10 o'clock. I can't sit there and hope that there's someone going to enter the marketplace at that right time. But if there's enough volume, enough trips, then the likelihood will be increased, right? So there's going to be some time. I mean, this isn't something that's going to happen tomorrow.
But what if taxi company lowers their profits? I know there was a huge profit, from the taxi business.
So if they raise the price, the taxi companies?
Yeah, if they lower the price, what is the advantage of choosing the rideshare?
Are there enough taxis to take all the people?
Well, wouldn't eventually revert to this system anyway?
Yeah, I mean, but then if they reduce their price, then the cost to entry to being a taxi company is going to go down.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like this project would end up like forming another.
Remember the first slide?
Uh,
What was the first slide? It says treat every car like a taxi. Right? It's basically what if you keep reducing the price, that's what will eventually happen, right?
But notice that there's sort of an additional benefit here, because you actually want to go from A to B, right?
Yeah.
So if someone is willing to participate in your gas costs, you'd be willing to do it. A taxi cab driver doesn't want to go anywhere, right? They want to sit at home, watch TV. So they don't have this, they have a higher cost automatically, just because of that.
So I was also wondering why you say the marginal cost is zero? Because if there's another people on your car, the MPG must go up, you have to pay more, even if it's slightly.
Oh, you mean because there's a higher weight?
Yeah, high weight. You have to pay more for
Wow. I'll tell that person to stop eating and going to McDonald's, and maybe his marginal cost wouldn't be so high. Yeah, okay, fine. I'll grant that more people in the car will consume more fuel. I will give you that. But I don't think it's the main thing here, right? But it's a good point. Okay. So the idea is cost sharing. How are we going to do it? So here's I don't want to get into spend too much time, but here's our approach for doing it. And I'll try to explain it. I wish I had an example. Okay. So the benefit is, you could think about everybody coming to the system. They have a weight. And so what should that weight be? The weight should be basically the direct ride time from your request point to your destination. And then the total length of the trip the car has to take. Each passenger then pays proportionally to their weight. And it's a simple algorithm, and that means everybody pays, it's sharing in the cost proportionally to their weight. And so the way we define weight is your direct ride time. And that basically simple rule solves a lot of the problems. And we're able to take it a step further. You're not only paying proportional, so that's a one car case. Suppose there's 2 cars. And the reason we make it globally is because we don't want to make it specific to what car you get assigned. So the marketplace is all these cars. You're going to share the cost savings among all the players in the market. So we'll determine the total cost of the trips out there right now. And you're going to pay proportionally direct time based across all the vehicles and all the drivers, not just the vehicle that you're in. And that's the simple rule that we have. And we'll illustrate it. We have a demo. I'm not sure I have time to get to it, but a very interesting demo that illustrates this concept very nicely. See, you shouldn't have told me to go so slow. I would have been able to get to the demo.
And so this basically provides the incentive for enlarging the market.
Yep, exactly. It enlarges the markets. It doesn't give you an incentive to delay. You come in early, you know your price. Yeah.
You talked about earlier reputation, like user reputation. Would that really affect the price? Like, say there's a driver who missed a couple pickups and has a lower rating, just like you mentioned eBay. Would that driver be cheaper if someone?
That's an excellent question. That's actually, we haven't. So our first basic pricing was basically in the sense we weren't looking at the reputation and the trust and security issues, right? We're just saying all drivers are equal. That's an excellent question. Is now then the question becomes all drivers aren't equal. Some drivers are much better than other drivers, right? Maybe the car type too, right? The car type should make a difference. And then the more you make these exceptions, the less you do the benefits of the simple one. So it's a trade-off between all these rating pricing system and the elegance and the simplicity of this rule. And that's really where we're looking at next as we go forward. That's a great question. OK, so embedded in this is routing, right? You got to have a schedule that picks up people. And so I don't know if the engineers in this room should say, so what? What's the big deal? Routing and scheduling. I know, Jen, you funded us for a long time through METRANS. So you're saying, what's new here? You guys have been doing routing forever. There's always something new. That's why we stay in business. Here's the difference between traditional routing and this problem. Every new pickup, your costs may actually go down. In traditional routing, every pickup, your costs are going to go strictly increasing function. Why may your costs go down? You may be able to get on a carpool lane. You may be able to skip paying a toll because you're an extra passenger. So costs aren't strictly increasing functions of the number of people in the vehicle or the number of pickups, right? In the traditional routing problem, the costs are strictly increasing with the number of pickups, typically. And so that's the basically new twist in the routing. Another thing, so this is talking about in terms of, if you're, let's say, suppose you enter the marketplace, and I am a kind of a taxi company, and I'm in the marketplace. I think of my car as a strategic entity. The question is, where should I be waiting with that car? How should I be driving that car in real time? And the traditional ways of doing it is you just drive, you constantly drive first to your next request. That's kind of moving forward. You drive first. The other one is you wait at the first stop and then you keep on, and you slack. So this is the slack time that you have in terms, and the slack time in this case is going to keep going down. Our strategy is you should distribute the slack evenly across the different locations. And if you distribute the slack evenly, you're the more likely to be near a request when a phone's called, right? So the idea, I don't think I gave you the idea. The idea is you just dropped up a passenger. What should you do with your idle vehicle? Should you move strategically to some location where people are going to be at? Should you go back to your depot? Should you drive to an anticipated place that you have a request, but it's much further down in time? Should we drive to it and wait there? So these are different ways. So the idea that we're looking at is distributing your slack evenly across all your requests. And that's kind of what our dynamic algorithm does. And again, you can see a benefit with that waiting strategy, much more than traditional approaches that don't use the waiting. How you distribute the slack of the car that's finishing. Yeah, don't have time for this. So that's basically gives you kind of a summary of us. So yeah.
So I just wanted to go back to your initial premise. So looking 30 to 50 years down the line. So if we can take that premise, and wondering if you can explore the Zipcar model, So you don't own the car. The agency, some agency owns the car. Everybody's a licensed driver. That's an assumption. So it is incentive. So I'm coming to USC. Let's say I'm coming from Pasadena, but I have a passenger who also wants to go to Long Beach. I take the Zipcar. I go to USC. The passenger I picked up somewhere along the way here. Then he gets in the driver mode. Then he takes it to Long Beach. Somebody else takes it to Orange County. It's the upfront cost of owning the car is not there. I have an incentive to share the car with somebody. It reduces my marginal cost.
That's fine.
It's moving along. Everybody's making money.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, yeah, sure. Zipcar is another way.
But Zipcar with.
But that's still a solo driver.
No, you are. I'm picking people up. It reduces my marginal cost.
So you're basically saying you're integrating Zipcar with sure, you could do that. Sure, you could. That's the integration of two different technologies. Sure.
But does it not?
So I'm not sure how that would violate the marketplace. So in that case, what you're basically saying is, Zipcar are the service providers.
No, I'm not saying
changing
that.
the decision maker. In your model, the car owner is the decision maker. That is to say, you're optimizing based on what the choices of the car owner.
Well, there's two
the car
decision makers
driver.
here. There's both the passenger and the driver.
Yeah, but
Okay.
neither one is there. At that point, you are free. You're totally uncoupled from car. You're uncoupled from your destination.
Right.
Your GPS and your algorithms are making the decisions, pairing up drivers, and So I'm looking for somebody. I'm coming from Pasadena. I'm saying to myself, let me pick up somebody close by from Glendale. Even I can go there. It's an incentive for me to pick up somebody to reduce my marginal cost.
Right.
I reach USC. The person is then going to Long Beach. Is going to Orange County. From there, he gives the car to somebody who's going to San Diego.
No, I understand that. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying. I guess I don't see it being in conflict with.
No,
with
there's
this.
no conflict. I would say that is a superior market. Let's say that word. It's a better transaction.
Better market. That's fair enough. I mean, well, I'm not sure if it's superior, but you can have both players, right? I mean, there's people who want cars themselves, right? People want to own a car.
But
so the both are.
30 to 50 years down the line, if a market you're looking at is transportation,
Right.
everybody's licensed,
Right.
you have an opportunity to make it a very seamless experience.
You know what? I have no debate with what you're saying. I think what you're saying is, I mean, sure, it's even better, right? You don't have to worry about parking in your own house.
Exactly.
It's beautiful. It's even better. So here's my next proposal.
But yeah, you just do both, right?
You can do both, yeah. There's nothing, yeah.
I'm curious about your distribution of the slack time.
Yeah.
So go back to that. You don't need to go back to that slide.
Okay.
Because instead of distributing the slack time evenly across all of your destinations, did you consider like distributing by the factor of either geographically or demographic profile of the location, and also the distance between your
Sure,
different
you could do that.
destinations?
No, we haven't, but that seems to be something that, yeah, that would be a smarter way of doing it.
Yeah, I would be supposing that would be.
That would be better, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Sure, yes.
How, like, obviously you would be a company that would have to do servers, so how would you get the money? Would it be like the drivers have to pay like a registration fee to you, or like each individual?
How do matching companies make money?
Yeah.
You want to answer that question right now, Masabumi?
Advertising?
Advertisement.
On the webpage.
Oh, okay.
And another one is in ride-sharing, ride-sharing companies charge some kind of transaction.
So you just get like a roll.
Per transaction cost. So basically, but most of it is the advertising. Actually, yeah. And there's USC has a bike sharing company where they allow the bikes basically to use it. You know how they make money? They advertise on the bike. They advertise on the bike. The bike, if you see these bikes with advertisements, so everybody's using it for free, so there's no cost, but it's just advertising, yeah?
Another question about maybe 50 years from now. Have you considered how self-driving cars would fit into this model?
I haven't, but I'm sure Petros, my colleague, would. No, I haven't. That's actually would be the next thing, right? I mean, it'd be kind of almost like integrating what you're saying with what he's saying.
Yeah, because the car would
just go, yeah.
Even better.
Even better, Mike. This is proposal number 2.
So speaking of the self-driving car, how would you solve the legal issue of the ride sharing? Say, for example, if the traffic accident happens.
Well, it doesn't even have to be a self-driving car. That's also an issue with with even just your own car right now. With that's the whole issue that people are preventing. That's what taxi companies use to keep people from the marketplace. Is how do you regulate safety, insurance, and drivers? That's exactly the argument taxi companies use. And so therefore, Uber is saying, well, we use licensed drivers who've been tested to drive commercial vehicles. They have the key issue is how do you ensure the drivers have the liability limits, right? Because commercial vehicles those drivers have much higher liability limits than what you and I have mandated. So clearly these are issues that have to be done from a legal point of view. And I think it doesn't have to be even self-driving. Even with your own car, you have to use it. I think basically liability issues are going to have to be addressed.
So what about the passengers? Do they have to sign a waiver before they take the ride sharing?
I don't know, Matsui, did you see if they have to sign waivers today in these matching companies? Do they have to sign a waiver? Do passengers have to sign a waiver? They don't for taxis. Do you sign a waiver for a taxi? I don't think so, so I don't doubt it. I doubt
But
it.
you're a public conveyance and there's an implicit contract.
It is. Peter, you had a question?
The only worry I have is that you keep saying 30 or 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a guy in 2005 saying smartphones are 30 to 50 years away.
That's what I said. I started off, remember, I think I corrected myself. I said I started off writing a proposal, envision 30, 50 years. But I caught myself. I said, we propose, I see this happening in the next 5 years.
Okay.
Remember, I said that at some point at the beginning.
Sorry.
Self-driving will make it
30, but that's why I didn't say in 30, it's self-driving. Right?
Have you or your team make any assumption or prediction about how many people get involved in this project?
No, but that's actually one of the questions. We want to do an empirical study about this. But we need money for that. For empirical study.
Speaking of the profit point, you have to know how many people get involved.
Absolutely. So we have to be very integrated to think of how many people want to participate in this. Yeah.
I've heard that rideshare numbers overall have been dropping.
They have dropped.
And so I guess I'm wondering how you see this as turning that around, or.
Well, I just watch the marketplace. I see how the companies are moving into ride matching. I think the things that's changing it's actually technology, the matching. So the ride-sharing numbers are a little bit outdated. These apps are pretty much relatively new. And I think what's going to make things easier is the matching. People can get on the application and say, who's going to bid in? And I can do it right now.
So is there data showing that those matching technologies have increased?
The only thing it's just too new. Most of these companies are less than a year old. And this is happening right before our very eyes. This is why this project is beautiful, is that we are working on a project as the marketplace is ahead of us in some ways. That's why it's very frustrating as a researcher. Because I don't work in most industries. I do work freight, distribution. It's not moving at the kind of speed this is moving. And so if you want to be an expert, you got to know what they're doing. And they're doing it here, and I'm trying to learn what they're doing. So I'm constantly learning.
So maybe my fear is that the biggest impediment here is the lobbying, right?
Yeah,
so if you live in LA, at least it's urban legend that there's no metro line to the airport because the taxi lobby.
She superseded that last time.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Is that true?
That's urban lore.
Okay, so
I actually don't know the answer to that.
Right. But
we believe it.
Could it be? I mean, it's the same thing with like who killed the electric car, right?
Right.
It's like somebody with money.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Okay, I have a response to that actually, and that is that you've made the point that there's all this stuff that's happening in the market. Uber car is happening. All kinds of other things are happening. And I don't think there's a way to take it back. I think that eventually the regulatory framework will have to adjust because there's going to be no way to take it back. Stopping the metro link into the airport, if it was the taxis, that's kind of a one-shot, lobby affair. There's all these apps out there. Everybody has a smartphone. What are you going to do about it? At some point. So I think it'll be overwhelmed by the demand in the marketplace itself.
I wanted to show the demo, but I guess I don't have time. But I did it anyway, just to say I did it.
How long is the demo?
It started. It's about 2-3 minutes. But anyway, the whole point is, I have to do some things because I'm zooming in because I didn't realize. So it'll take a few minutes to set up. But the main idea is that we have 2 drivers, one going from USC to Chinatown, another one going to downtown. And there's Anne who wants to go to, this one is Anne going to downtown also?
Anne wants to go to Chinatown.
Anne wants to go to Chinatown. So she can actually go directly with this person to go to Chinatown, or she can go to here, and you can see what happens to the whole pricing and the whole, so it kind of illustrates the whole setup and what happens to the pricing and example. So I mean, I just want to show that we actually are building kind of a prototype system, and it's up and running. We also have another example which shows, remember I said, you get Anne, suppose there's another car that gets out here that has ride sharing, and Anne's not in that car. Anne will share in that benefit, proportionally to her distance. And that's what these illustrate. And I guess I don't have that much more time.
Okay. Thank you.